Hey, y'all, welcome to Curiosity by Design. Today we're reading Mixed Signals. Have you ever been in a room where they said they wanted creativity, but the safest move was clearly to stay inside the lines? That's the ache underneath this episode. The moment where you feel the mismatch before you can fully explain it, be bold, think differently, bring fresh ideas, challenge assumptions, no bad ideas. But the room itself, whether in person or virtual, says something else. It says stay practical, stay aligned, stay concise, stay in scope, stay useful, stay easy to approve. And then you wonder, am I overreacting? Am I being difficult? Am I the only one feeling this gap? But sometimes you're not overreacting. Sometimes you're feeling something very honest and very true. Sometimes you're accurately reading the architecture. So let's take a look at today's artifact. Okay. So again, here's the artifact. This is a fictional composite. Like I said, we're not here to read people aloud. I mean, most people aloud, but the pattern's very real. I'm sure you've probably seen this. It is a polished internal workshop agenda, an innovation sprint, a creative strategy lab. Sounds great, and it looks really good. It's clean, it's organized, it has a purpose, has norms, has a clear agenda. It has breakout opportunities, even has evaluation criteria about how ideas move forward. Makes my heart sing. And honestly, a lot of this is reasonable. A business should know its priorities. A team should know what it can resource. A session should have some frame around what happens next. That's not the issue at all. The issue is the gap between the invitation and the actual decision space. It says explore new possibilities, think boldly, creative risk encouraged. But the operating logic says align with current priorities, use the approved template, stay practical, prepare for leadership review, and understand that final decisions live somewhere else. So the question is not, are constraints present? We need constraints, especially for our most creative work. The question is, are the constraints honest? Here's the read. Invitation is bigger than the permission. The architecture is full of mixed signals. And I see three things really happening here. One, the room invites imagination. Who doesn't want that? I love those rooms. The language is expansive. Creative strategy lab, explore new possibilities, challenge assumptions, no bad ideas, help us imagine what could be. That language matters. Quite honestly, it makes me want to be in that room so badly. I love those spaces. It tells people what kind of energy to bring. It tells them what kind of self might be welcome here. So people arrive thinking, maybe this is a room I can really offer something alive. Two, the structure, however, narrows that permission. We may not always be able to name it, but we for sure feel it. Use approved concept brief, stay solutions oriented, keep ideas practical and implementable. Avoid scope creep, always important. Align with strategic priorities, prepare for leadership review. Again, not bad constraints. A real constraint can totally sharpen the work. But a hidden constraint does something different. It lets the room borrow the emotional energy of creativity without giving creativity real consequence. The room could have said, this is a refinement session. It could have said, this is an implementation workshop. It could have said, we are looking for practical improvements inside an existing strategy. That would be honest. But when the language says imagination and the structure says refinement, people feel the gap. The gap is exhausting and costly. Third, the reward logic scores alignment. Look what actually moves forward. Alignment to strategic priorities, near-term impact, feasibility in the current operating system, implementation readiness, stakeholder buy-in, resource efficiency. Again, not villain criteria. These are real business concerns. But they're not neutral. They tell people what kind of idea survives. And the ideas most likely to survive are not necessarily the boldest, strangest, most challenging, or most imaginative. They're the ideas that are easiest to recognize, approve, resource, and fit into the current architecture. So the hidden lesson is not really be creative. The lesson is be creative in a way that protects alignment, or even sharper, be bold until it has to be approved. So the workplace can do this, a team meeting can do this, a school can do this, a strategy session, brand, leadership team, creative studio, a whole culture can do this. It can say one thing in the value statement and then teach another thing in the room. Say creativity and reward polish. Say curiosity, reward certainty. Say inclusion and reward sameness. Say innovation and reward permission seeking. You say collaboration, but reward whoever already has power. And people notice. They notice where energy dies. They notice which ideas get welcome and which ideas get quietly redirected. They notice who gets called strategic and who gets called difficult. They notice when bold means bold enough to sound fresh, but not bold enough to require anything different. That is the curriculum. So we often call this a mindset problem because architecture would indict the reward system. We say people need to be more creative, need to speak up, take more risks, think outside the box. Maybe, sometimes. But maybe the people are not withholding because they lack imagination. Maybe they are reading the room accurately. Maybe they have learned that creativity is welcome so long as it does not change the decision. Maybe they have learned that bold thinking is rewarded only after it has been made familiar enough to be safe. That's where the mixed signals become really expensive. They do not just confuse people, they train people to split themselves. Publicly, they perform the stated value. Privately, obey the rewarded one. Perform creativity, protect alignment. Performance is exhausting and takes a lot of resources. So for me, this is the agency turn. Name the real decision space. Align what is said with what is rewarded. Do not tell people to be creative if the room punishes deviation. Do not tell people to be honest if the room rewards comfort. Do not tell people to experiment if the system only celebrates clean outcomes. Do not tell people to challenge assumptions if the actual assumption is that leadership is always right. Again, the answer is not to remove all constraints. We need constraints. Removing all constraints would be super lazy and not productive. The answer, however, is tell the truth about the constraint. If the goal is alignment, say alignment. The goal is refinement, say refinement. If the goal has already been made, do not call the room a co-creation lab. If leadership is only looking for implementation ideas, do not ask people to imagine the future from scratch. People can work creatively inside a real frame, but you have to build it and let people know what that frame is. What breaks trust is the fake frame. An invitation to be bold inside a system that has already decided what kind of boldness will be allowed, not okay. Agency requires a trustworthy read of the room. What kind of contribution is actually wanted here? What level of risk is real? What happens if I name a contradiction? Who has decision power? What will be rewarded if the conversation gets uncomfortable? Because people do not only respond to what is said, they respond to what the architecture protects. And if the stated value and the protected behavior are misaligned, people will follow the protection every time. So here's your practice question for the week. Where does the room say creativity but score alignment? Or more pointedly, where is the invitation wider than the actual decision space? Look at one room this week: meeting, a workshop, hiring process, a content strategy, a team ritual, a client conversation. Ask, what do we say we value here? What behavior actually moves forward? What behavior gets praised but not chosen? What behavior gets softened, redirected, delayed, or quietly filtered out? Where are we asking people to perform one value while obeying another? And what would need to change so the room becomes more honest? So to take with you, mixed signals are not just annoying, they're instructional. They teach people how much of themselves to bring, how much truth to risk, how much creativity is safe, which part of the stated values are real, and which parts are decorative. That is why contradiction matters. Because when a room says creativity but rewards compliance, people do not become less creative. They become more careful. They learn the real lesson. Be bold until it has to be approved. Perform creativity, protect alignment. And that's not creativity. That is compliance with better language. So I'll leave you with this. Where is the invitation wider than the actual decision space? Bring that to the table. Let me know in the comments or DM me. I'd love to chat.